good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever the case may be where you are. My name is Sam Ogden, and I am a contributing writer for the wildly popular skeptical blog called Skepchick, which of course you can find on the tubes at skepchick.org. As you can see today, they've pulled me away from my computer keyboard, set me in front of this camera here at the fabulous Houston Museum of Natural Science for a conversation with Dr. Genie Scott. Dr. Scott is the Executive Director of the National Center for Science Education. She's a prominent voice in the fight to keep creationism out of our public schools. She's a PhD in physical anthropology. She was a university professor in subjects relating to evolution. She's a regular speaker at science conferences and universities across the country and around the world. She's become a film critic of late. I'm pretty sure she invented the color blue, and I heard she's pitching Game 1 of the World Series this year. She's a very busy woman, which is why we're extremely pleased to have her with us today. Dr. Scott, welcome to Houston. How are you getting on so far?
Very, very well, except I throw like a girl, so, you know, what can I say?
Well, that's all right. I tell you, introducing you, I start to feel bad about myself with all those accomplishments that you have.
Well, you lied about some of them, but, you know.
Oh, really? What did I make up?
Well, the World Series part, you know, I'm not going to be throwing out the
Well,
first
that's
ball
just what I heard. That's just what I heard.
I got to get better writers, what can I say?
Yeah, but let's face it, if I wasn't here talking to you today, I'd be at home rearranging my sock drawer or something, so you make me feel
well,
like
I'm
our
delighted
paths
to spend some time with you.
Completely going the opposite direction. That's the difference between you and me, I guess. You're speaking in front of federal judges and lecturing in front of 1,000 people at science museums, and I spent the morning trying to get the last little bit out of an aerosol cheese can. So. But we are glad to have you with us as you're swinging through Texas. I was thinking about this the other day. With the amount of time that you spend in Austin in front of the Texas State Board of Education grappling with the likes of Don McElroy and Terry Leo and the rest of the creationist cabal that make up about half of the Texas State Board, we might as well just make you an honorary Texan.
I'd be proud to be an honorary Texan.
It comes complete with a white cowboy hat and everything because you're one of the good guys. Well,
hey, that's good, that's good, that's good. But I notice we're sitting here against this black backdrop and we both accidentally wore black today. People are going to get the wrong idea.
So the white cowboy hat might actually help then.
that might help a lot.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because I get the sense that a lot of people outside the state of Texas and probably a lot of people inside the state of Texas don't have a full understanding of the depth and breadth of the issues that came out of the March hearings. Mm-hmm. And I know the National Center for Science Education was deeply involved in that. So if you could give us just a high-level overview of those hearings, the impetus for them, the implications of them, the National Center for Science Education's role and your role in particular.
Well, the story about the most recent conflict about evolution in Texas goes back for many years. All states have science education standards. They also have standards in math and history and other fields. But science education standards in Texas are called the TEKS, the Texas Educational Knowledge and Skills, TEKS. And they've been around for a couple decades now. And there was some wording in one of the what are called the process skills. The science is a way of knowing, the part of the TEKS that tells you about the nature of science rather than the part of the TEKS that tells you exactly what to teach in chemistry or biology or whatever. And the process skill 3A, the infamous 3A, back in 1998 was written to read that students should know about the strengths and weaknesses of scientific theories. Now, that was kind of a funny way to phrase it, but it wasn't in itself terribly objectionable. It was a phrase that was in the physics standards, the chemistry standards, the biology standards, the environmental science, all of the various TEKS disciplinary standards had that phrase, strengths and weaknesses of scientific theories. But in 2003, when biology textbooks came up for adoption, guess what discipline that phrase was applied to the exclusion of all others. Of course, biology. And of course, within biology, the only scientific theory that it was applied to was the E word. So evolution was singled out among all the possible biology theories, all the possible science theories, to apply this strengths and weaknesses language to. I wonder why, right? So obviously, this wording was being used to devalue evolution, to present it as just a guess or a hunch or something that students shouldn't take any special notice of, with the overall goal of trying to slip in creationist explanations as an alternative.
Right, right.
So there was this big fight in 2003 and 4 about biology books, and it's true that, you know, Chairman McElroy and his allies worked very hard to try to get the textbook publishers to rewrite their books to include the weaknesses, because they only had the strengths. And of course, the whole thing about strengths and weaknesses of evolution is bogus to start with.
Right.
I often tell people that, you know, go to your local college and go to the biology department and ask them if they could provide you with their list of weaknesses of evolution, please.
Yeah.
And they'll just look at you like, what? You know, where are you coming from? There is no list of weaknesses of evolution that's known to science. If you ask the proponents of these views, Dr. McElroy has a whole list, right? The creationists have their list, and it's the old lists that have been around from the creation science folks and the intelligent design folks in a long time. So then comes the revision of the TEKS, which actually began in 2008 and then continued to this year. And those hearings in January and March that you were talking about reflected the final step in this really quite long process that began back a year ago. In 2008, where committees and the various disciplines were brought together to revise the TEKS and change the wording where they felt it necessary. Well, when actually all of the disciplinary committees, not just the biologists, but the chemists and the physicists and everybody else, they all rewrote that 3A strengths and weaknesses TEKS. So that instead of saying strengths and weaknesses, it actually expressed, I can't tell you it from memory, but it actually expressed a very reasonable standard for students to use. It talked about students being able to analyze and evaluate information, which is what scientists do.
Right, right.
Dr. McElroy and his allies weren't happy with that. And they immediately tried to get that rewritten, and through amendments and pressure on the committees and all kinds of stuff. And they did actually get some weakening amendments to that standard, as well as a number of other standards.
A lot of the language that finally made its way into the science curriculum standards implies those weaknesses.
Yes, it does. The good news for Texas and the students here and the teachers is that there's more evolution in the standards, this version than previous versions, which is all to the good. The bad news is that there are these, you know, compromises, there are these weakening amendments that did water down and, you know, none of the standards say, go forth and teach creationism, okay? But a number of the standards had tweaks of the wording that basically would open the door if a creationist teacher wanted to go there.
It's that softening of the language that allows it to come in.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate, because what that means is that parents and other people concerned about science education and science as a way of knowing in Texas really have to pay attention to what's going on in the classroom. Because it's, you know, the familiar, what did you do in school today, dear? Nothing. I mean, you really don't know what goes on in the classroom once the teacher shuts the door, right? So parents have to really find out, you know, can I take a look at your textbook? Can I take a look at the handouts that the teacher is giving you? The textbooks are going to be okay. They're not going to have the weaknesses. But the teacher may be providing supplementary material, and you really don't know unless you ask your kid what's going on in class.